It's Capt here again for another episode of Fearless Flight Live. As you can see, I've got my trusty helpers here, Dieter Staudinger up in Toronto and Eric Larson down here in the Phoenix area with me. I guess we can say Diane's on assignment since she's working and making a living, doing better than the rest of us. So anyway, but we're happy to be with you this evening. And this is the place that you go, as you know, for information and how-tos and tools if you're trying to get over a fear of flying, or if you know somebody who's trying to get over a fear of flying, either drag them over here or send them over on your own, and or if you just want to join us and talk about flying and aviation and the industry a little bit, we love doing that as well. If you're on you should be joining us on Facebook or YouTube, please leave a comment or question. We love questions, and we'll try to get to them during the course of the show. And thanks again for coming back. We really appreciate it. So we want to move into this week's show. Let me share my screen.
While Ron gets ready, if you haven't joined our Birds of a Feather Facebook group, that's our really, it's a group for you where you can get support others, pay it forward, and learn about all sorts of top news. I can see iHeart Daily. There we go. Here we go.
Okay, so as Dieter said, he's got the link in there. You can see the link at the bottom of the screen. We're up over, got to be pushing 1,300 now.
Almost, we've had 1,250.
Yeah, we've had critical mass for some time, which means that we get a lot of nice interaction between us on the staff here and you all out there in various stages of trying to overcome your fear of flying. So if you haven't joined, please consider doing that. All right. And tonight we're going to talk about, we'll just briefly review the membership. We're going to go over our prize winners from last week. And right now, I want you to think, what triggers your anticipatory anxiety? Post your answer. And you might relate it to winter operations, because that's what we're going to do tonight. So if you got any questions related to flying in the winter, anything and everything about that, since we're getting into that part of the year, and you'd be just like crew members like Eric and I have been. And as we get into winter season, we have to review all of our procedures. So we're going to talk about some of the things that we worry about so that you don't have to. And remember, we're going to provide some information here that at the very least we hope is interesting to you. But what we're really trying to do is use our model for educating people so that you can get rid of some of the myths that you have and some of the responsibilities that you feel sometimes, like if you don't worry about it, it's not going to happen. And Eric and I are going to tell you a lot of details and things like that, but we're not trying to make you pilots. We're trying to make you good passengers in the back. All right, so keep that in mind as you go through us here tonight. This is, of course, the homepage for our Fearless Flyer Club, which we have officially named it. We ran a contest for people to submit, and we came up with 6 prize winners. And again, as a reminder, you can get Clear for Takeoff 201 and all of our products now. You can get them through this app that we have, which has been long in the making to get that, so that you can do things on demand when you're wanting to do it, rather than have to wait for a live class or something of the sort there. And so it's available on either the App Store or Google Play, and you can put it on any of your portable devices there. And just a quick review of the various levels of membership. And you know that we have promoted for a long time the importance of becoming or staying connected with us, and this is a great way to do it, to keep yourself current and not let yourself go into relapse, because many of us, the reality is we just don't fly that much, and so the more you can stay connected to us, the better it is. Just heard from Lauren Dicker. Eric and I were talking about her today. She just landed just a couple hours ago, Eric, and And it was great. She said the Fearless Flight Kit saved her buns. That was the short version. She didn't exactly say that, but she said it was very helpful for her to use that. And maybe we can get Lauren on to talk a little bit more about her experiences. She's got some great pictures that she sent me. She had I think her son is 11 years old, and the 11 sticks up. It may be 11 years since they took a vacation. I'm not sure, but her son is he looks like he's in middle school or so, and you could see the smile on his face when they hit Disney World down in Florida, and it was really, really a great experience for all of them. So stick with us. Okay, again, our prize winners, our grand prize winner who got a lifetime membership was Tracy Urzy. And then we had some other, Dieter and I decided that because of the great participation, and we want to encourage support in participation, Phyllis Zuniga and Alice Foster also got lifetime first class memberships. Ellie Ricci, who's been a really, really active person in the groups and personal coaching, and she and I have had several dialogues. She won a lifetime premium economy membership, as did Lakshmi Yadia from India, and I've had a coaching call with her, and Rosario Hildevert. Okay, also. So congratulations again to those folks. I did send out a personal welcome finally today, and I apologize for getting behind the power curve on that. But if you all have any questions about accessing all that, don't hesitate to let us know. So,
Ron,
Eric,
I just want to acknowledge Julie. Julie wrote in a comment that what triggers her is being stuck inside and not being able to get out. So that's thanks for your courage, Julie. I really appreciate you sharing that. And while we're going to be talking more about the winter weather, it still is one of those things when you're in an airplane and there's a lot of snow and ice around you, that probably is even more cause for wanting to get out. So if you want to maybe put in the comment what specifically is going on, that would be great. Maybe at the end of the presentation we can get into that a little bit. Okay.
Yeah, and I think at the very face value of this, I'm sure what she's talking about is what bothers most of the people that we deal with anymore, and that is just feeling trapped in there. You know, and certainly what we're going to talk about tonight is people hate. It's always funny because you hate to get on the airplane, but once you get on the airplane, keep that sucker moving. Everybody wants to do that. So any delays getting to the runway, aggravate that sense of being trapped in there. And tonight, Eric and I are going to talk about winter flying, and you're very likely to get delays between the gate and the runway, as Eric and I will point.
There you go, Ron. Just if you just intro the presentation, then for Scott, we got the recording.
Okay. So again, I'd like to welcome everybody. And tonight we're going to talk about winter weather operations. Eric and I are going to highlight what goes on. We're going to talk about some of the experiences that you'll have, some of the things you'll see, sights, sounds, and sensations. And if you got any comments, whether you're watching us live or in the replay, please don't hesitate to put them in the remarks there. Okay. So winter weather. It is what it is, and we kind of got it lumped in here. We're going to go over in a way that you're not going to be able to pass your recurrent quiz at the end of tonight, but we're going to give you something to think about, and hopefully you'll be able to fall back on. So ground operations, there's two areas there. One is the snow removal and all that, and basically the airport's responsible for that. Although, Eric, correct me, most of the companies, the individual companies, they have to do their own gates, don't they? Keep their gates clear?
I think that's right. The city isn't going to get in and plow the gates.
Okay, so we're going to talk about snow removal and de-icing operations and how what you might see there. So we got this. So what's our mood-driven friend here all about, Eric?
Well, I told Ron to put this slide in, and that is a Holstein, not a Guernsey. It's a dairy cow, so it probably has a name. And we were making a joke. One of the things we consider, and forgive me in advance, I'm going to try not to talk too fast. This is hours in a recurrent class. And if you have questions, shoot them forth. We'll answer them. If not this week, next week, or whatever. But one of the things we consider is the surface friction. And that last slide where Ron had the cow, where the runway is deemed to be contaminated if there's stuff on it, snow, ice, that sort of thing. And a fellow that, and we go, well, gee, that looks pretty slippery. How do we know that? And the way we know that is they have an employee in what's called the skid mobile, which is like driving the Zamboni, only a lot more exciting. And the guy in the skid mobile goes racing down the runway at a high rate of speed, slams on the brakes, and the coefficient of friction is related to him by, they use the abbreviation, the Greek letter mu. And then we translate those index numbers to what we call braking action, good, fair, poor, or nil. And then we factor that into takeoff considerations for rejected takeoff or landing considerations. We make adjustments to those distances on the ground based on the friction that's on the runway. And as Ron says, that's for us to worry about and not you, but we're just demonstrating here that this is not guesswork. We do come up with a fairly accurate number and a way to translate that into how the airplane will perform on the runway.
Yeah, and in the, let me get on the next slide there. Oh gosh, my slides are they've got a mind of their own here. So anyway, okay. So you want to talk about this next one a little bit, Eric?
Another thing we're going to do is to when we come out to the airplane, two things happen in terms of de-icing or anti-icing. If the airplane has ice or contaminants on it, we remove them with de-icing fluids, strip the airplane so it's clean. If it's,
and I'll go back to that chart in just a minute, Eric. I just want to give a shot of what it looks like out there in a wide body. Okay.
Yeah, and the good comment here is if you think your job is terrible, take a look at these guys. That is not a happy place to be, especially with a 40-mile-an-hour wind. So the first thing we consider is if the airplane's contaminated, but there's no weather, we remove everything from it and we're good to go. The second consideration is if it's snowing or raining or snow pellets or those kind of things, then after we strip it clean, we have to put a protective layer of anti-icing fluid on the or de-icing fluid on the airplane, which will absorb the precipitation coming down until it's time to take off. And this table shows temperature spreads, the type of precipitation, the rate of precipitation, and how much time we have between the fluid application and the time to go out to runway to where that will give us protection. The what we call that fluid is type 4 fluid. And the interesting thing about type 4 fluid is the chemical lattice is lined up in parallel, like silica or mica, if you've ever seen those. So what happens is it sits on the wing and the elevators, and as the airplane accumulates that stuff, it absorbs it. And when we go down the runway at 80, 90, 100 miles an hour, all of a sudden it shears off the airplane. So it drops it on the runway and the airplane's completely clean for the takeoff. And it's quite something, and that's how it works. And these tables demonstrate how we calculate how much time we have based on the precipitation that's present and the type of precipitation it is.
And I don't think it's too much to say that the technology of the doggone de-icing is right up in there with the engines. Wouldn't you say, Eric? I mean, compared to when I started flying, for sure.
Oh yeah, this is taking our guesswork out of it for us, and it's a good thing. So what this is showing is at first we'll strip everything that's on the airplane off. But if we're going to apply that secondary type of fluid, the type 4 de-icing fluid, we'll only apply that to the wings and the elevators, the lifting surfaces that are critical to be clean at takeoff. We do that with the engine shut down, the APU shut down, everything else, and all the external valves closed, so they can spray that stuff all over. And when we start the airplane back up, often you'll notice kind of a funny smell as the engines initially ingest the air cycle machine with the airflow, but it's gone in seconds and you have a normal atmosphere in the cabin. We don't have to do that in the air because, as you know, the airplane's moving nearly 500 miles an hour through the air, and there's no way for anything to accumulate on any of those horizontal surfaces. Only at the impact points at the front of the wings, front of the engines. That's the only place that can accumulate. And we have anti-icing equipment in the airplane that we can deal with that and remove it in flight.
And so,
yeah.
Yeah, no, go ahead. And I put in the slide up here, anti-skid. It might have been better served to put it on the beginning one. So I kind of alluded to the fact that we have really two considerations when we're flying in winter operations. One is are we experiencing them in the departure airport? Are we experiencing them on the arrival airport, or both? And so if we're having it at the departure airport, it's not just a matter of making sure that we don't have any extra weight via ice and snow on the wings or anything like that. We also have to plan on stopping, and that's why Eric went through the whole mu computations and all that. But we also have, like on your car, we have anti-skid brakes on the airplane, and so if we had to reject the takeoff or stop, the airplane, again, you may remember from just a standard takeoff configuration that we talk about all the time, we have to put that airplane into play with no more than the maximum weight that we can either get it going and stop it in the remaining runway, or get it airborne in the remaining runway. And so the main reason that we look at when the runway is slippery or less than dry is what happens, because that changes our stopping distance. So sometimes you may be involved in a flight, depending on how much fuel they need to fulfill the legality of the flight time or the fuel on board, where they actually have to reduce the weight on the airplane. And we kind of do that by first we go look for cargo to pull off the airplane. Next we go for baggage, because it's not as likely to complain as you are. And then sometimes we have to pull people off the airplane. But the good news is most nowadays with the equipment and the airplanes that we're operating with the super high bypass engines, we got enough thrust that just an average winter weather storm won't affect us. So anyway, so you want to talk about accumulating flight? You already talked about, Eric, a little bit about how it only seems to stick on the impact points, and talk about then how we get rid of that stuff.
So we have components in the airplane that measure critical things, help us measure airspeed, altitude, that sort of thing, pressure coming into the engine cowl, and those are small instruments and they are electrically heated. So those come on automatically so that we don't forget them when we start an engine. And they're heated for the whole flight so that no accumulation can happen on these critical instruments. The other surfaces are the cowl or the lip around the engine, the nose dome in the center part of the engine, and the leading edge of the wings. And we heat those with what we call engine bleed air, hot air extracted from the engine and sent through plumbing out to those control surfaces and melt the ice off of any of the surfaces that may have accumulated on. It's a side story, but it was kind of an interesting thing. Originally in the 737, it was assumed that the leading edge of the tail would have to be de-iced as well. And the airplane was built and plumbed so that could be done. And in wind tunnel testing and flight testing, it was discovered that ice doesn't really stick. It doesn't stick to the tail. Due to airflow over the wings and hot engine exhaust, that kind of thing, it just doesn't stick there. So the tail is not de-iced because it never doesn't develop a problem, which is kind of a curious thing. So we
can see it, but I just put it up there so they could see that we're talking about the empennage on the airplane, the back end of the airplane.
Right, and we can run that heat as necessary. It does give us a performance and a power penalty to extract that hot air from the engines. But that's once we're in the air, so that doesn't really concern us for takeoffs and landings. And in general, the altitudes where accumulating ice are down low. And once we climb out to our normal cruise altitudes, we either clear clouds usually, and or the outside air temperature becomes so low, there's no more water vapor in the clouds, and there's nothing there to stick to the airplane. So we usually only need to operate those systems in the approach or the departure area of the airport. We don't need to operate them all the time.
And those of you who live in higher altitude elevations know this already. When you're at altitudes like Denver, Colorado, a mile higher above, you notice that I mean, it's not to say that you won't get melting if the sun's beating down on the asphalt, but generally speaking, the snow doesn't melt, it sublimates due to the low pressure. So anytime we're climbing out, if there were any ice or anything that would accumulate, and we're climbing to altitude, it's going to disappear on its own anyway, as Eric said. And sublimation means that it doesn't need to go through the liquid stage. It goes directly from the solid to vapor, to water vapor. And so again, so if we got any questions, I don't know if Dieter is fielding any there. I have one other thing we're going to talk to that's kind of related, but again, we want to emphasize that this is not meant to make you pilots, because no matter what you say, we're not going to let you in the cockpit to fly, no matter how strong your control issues are. But we want you to at least have a little bit of education, and all of this information is available in much greater detail, both in the course or if you want to subscribe to our monthly webinars. So, okay. Anything?
There's one question, and just curious about how is it different flying in winter versus summer for you as a pilot? Is there like, I'm not sure what the question is like pointed out, but it's just, is there's a difference for the aircraft flying in winter versus summer? So,
well, I'll quickly say, and Ron can add it, once you've taken into consideration those performance issues with runway and or airplane contamination and dealt with them, once the airplane's flying and you're in the air, it's just like you're in the air any other time. Except it's actually a lot of times nicer in terms of increased performance, because the cold air temperature makes the air much more dense, and the airplane will climb out in a more spirited fashion. It's able to perform better in the cold, dense air. So once you've made those considerations and dealt with them, and you're actually flying, then really not much difference at all.
Yeah, okay. Exactly. The airplane does not care, and this will open the scope on this. It doesn't care whether it's snowing out, raining out, or whatever. We never leave the gate without the amount of computed thrust being proportional and commensurate with the performance that we are required to prove that we can do if the worst case happens, which would be losing thrust on one engine. Okay, let me repeat that in English. Okay, we never leave the gate. It doesn't matter what it's doing outside. It doesn't matter whether there's clouds. It doesn't matter whether there's anything going on outside. We know when we leave the gate that the performance that airplane proved it could operate within the envelope and give us the safety margins that we wanted, it's already been determined. So whether it's hot out, like summer in Arizona, for example, or whether it's cold in the winter, you know, as Eric mentioned, we got more thrust when it's colder. So in the winter, in some ways, we're better off. We might not be able to carry as much, but we've got just a whole bunch of thrust because the weather is cooler. But the airplane, it operates the way we program it. Okay. And we have a question there that's somewhat related to that. I think I lost my share, didn't I? Okay, let me bring that up again.
Or you could just read it from your slide and.
Yeah, I couldn't get the slide up here, so.
Oh.
Okay, so, well, maybe. Okay, there we go. So this was kind of related, and this is I could say this is a theme. So just had someone who participated. By the way, if you aren't aware, we have 2 free classes every month. One is a live class that Eric and I and Diane put on Saturday night at the Phoenix Airport. So if you are ever in the Phoenix Airport on the first Saturday of the month, with certain exceptions, you can come to the class, and we spend the whole time in the airplane. The following morning, for those people who couldn't make it to the Phoenix class, who live anywhere else in the world, we essentially have the same class. We have the 101 online class on the following Sunday morning. And so we had a number of people on the class on Sunday. And one of the questions, follow-up questions that she sent to me I answered a couple of her questions. So she says, thanks for responding. And I asked her, because this is what our brains do. They make a story up. When we don't know what the truth is, our brains will make it up. So I asked her, so what is it about rain and clouds, knowing full well that that's a number of you have that question out there. What is it about that in the correlation or relationship between that and turbulence and decreased visibility and all that? The average fearful flyer, if there was such a thing, sees clouds or sees moisture in the air and immediately lets their mind run off to turbulence. And there may or may not be any relationship between that. Generally speaking, if you have low visibility and like fog and things like that, even if there's light rain or something like that, usually the air mass is very stable, very smooth, and you don't get turbulence. The only times that you tend to get turbulence when there are clouds is when you have convective activity, like cumulonimbus clouds. The prettier the cloud, the bumpier they tend to be. But again, we don't run around looking for those things and seeing if we can go in there and making your life miserable and making ours miserable as well. We use radar to make sure that if we have to go through those kinds of clouds, that there's nothing really hard in them, like a lot of moisture, like thunderstorms. Okay. So rain and clouds do not guarantee that you're going to have more turbulence. And the folks that flew with me just 3 weeks ago or so out of Burbank, they saw that. We got to the airport, it was low visibility, light drizzle in the air, and we took off and it was smooth as glass and no consequence there. Anything to add, Eric, about that? I mean, we don't get up in the morning and look at clouds and say, oh, woe is me, right?
Correct. And that was a very good way to split it up between convective activity and a widespread area of low pressure where you could be, when I used to fly little airplanes where I couldn't get on top of that, I could be in those clouds for minutes or hours and never see anything and have a completely smooth ride. Only aware that I'd gone from point A to point B until I landed at point B. So there is a big difference.
Okay. So any other questions there, Dieter?
Well, I'm gonna say that I think it was Shally asked about the Tanzania flight. What happened there? All I at this point know is what we got, and that is unfortunately 19 people, I think, perished in Tanzania. That I don't even know. I think it was a propeller aircraft. Not sure. Eric, do you know a little bit more? I just know that it ended up in the Lake Victoria. So
it ended up in Lake Victoria. I don't know what their problem is and how long they'd had the problem before they ended up in the lake. It appeared to be an ATR 72, a very high performance French turboprop, a very good airplane. And I'm only guessing that because all I could see was the tail. But it looked like an ATR tail. And as far as any details about how they came to be there, I've seen nothing so far.
Okay. So we'll follow up on that and see what kind of information we can find out.
And then Julie is asking about, is there a chance to sit in an airplane in Burbank? Well, not like in the Cleared for Takeoff 101 classes in Phoenix, if that's what you're meaning. But we don't have actually a Burbank class scheduled at this point, right? So
right. And there's two things about that. One, I have done one-to-one coaching with people in their respective locations, and I have been able to coordinate with most of the time Southwest, and I have been actually able to do a coaching class in their presence with them on an airplane, and Southwest has been gracious enough to do that. But generally speaking, the only time we can actually get an airplane like that long term is when if you can get to the Phoenix area. And we used to do the class at the Air Hollywood Studios in Burbank, which many of you, particularly in the LA area, have seen the old advertisement stuff like that. But unfortunately, the gentleman that ran that studio actually shut that location down and had to relocate in another part of the Southern California area because of the pandemic, and it just business, just like so many, just tried, it completely disappeared for them. So but we're always looking to build relationships and with other airports. And this coming year, I'm going to announce, generally, we haven't picked the date or anything, but it looks like we're going to have at least one of the Clear for Takeoff 301 classes that we're going to do is going to be back in the Boston area. And we're going to find at least 2 other areas that we're going to do flying classes next year somewhere else. And the choices are anywhere from New York to Philly to Orlando to Dallas to Atlanta. We don't know where it's going to be yet. So the more of you that join the 201 class in a given area, the higher the probability that we're going to do that. And so as we bring this to a closer, I want to point out, as you can see in the slide, the next coaching call is going to be, the 17th of the month at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for all of you who change your clocks, 9:30 Eastern Time. And so you can get that either if you're enrolled as an active member in the Clear for Takeoff 201 course, or you're in one of our membership programs, or if you want to just purchase that coaching call, you can do that as well. So.
And I already put the link for that in the comments as well. So and yeah, so because we're getting a lot of Houston, Washington D.C.
All right, Houston. Actually, Houston. There's a lot of folks in Houston down there. One of our good friends, Angie, who's taken the 201 course, and she's flown to England and whatnot. Yeah, and I know, and just over the last couple of weeks, I've had 3 or 4 people join from Houston down there. So
we may or may not then have Houston on the calendar for 2023. So
anyway. So thanks again for all of you. Thanks, Dieter. Thanks, Eric, for helping me out tonight. And once again, come back next week for another episode of Fearless Flight Live. We'll see you and have a great week. Okay, bye-bye.
All right, and have a great trip, Dawn.